Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm excited about today's video. So what we're doing here is I'm gonna share with you guys why I love commercial real estate, and I think you should too. I got into commercial real estate many years back. I got into it, had some success, and made the decision because the residential market was hot. I made the decision to switch over and start doing residential, right? Was selling a bunch of houses, but that was a mistake. When it comes to investing, and even as a transactional person, right, whether you're wholesaling or doing or if you're a realtor like I was a realtor, you're still better off doing commercial real estate. And my challenge here, right, in this video is to try to persuade you that commercial real estate is significantly better than residential for investing. And I'm gonna give you guys 7 reasons, right? And let me know in your comments if I persuaded you or if I did not, or if you have some counterpoints. It's all complex. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. So let's get started without further ado. So in my business, right, 501k, some of what we do is wholesaling, right? And for those of you that are not familiar with wholesaling, there's tons of videos out there, right? But in a nutshell is I go out there, look for a great deal, and then I get that great deal, right? It's something, whatever type of property it is, and then I give it to somebody else who's gonna take it to the finish line, right? And then I get a finder's fee for just taking that deal that I found, right? Needle in a haystack, and giving it to the person, whether it's a developer or a flipper, right, of homes or whatever it is, right? So in my business, we do wholesaling, but we only do commercial. And the reason commercial real estate is better when it comes to wholesaling is because, and I think I've heard Pace Morby say that the national average wholesale fee, right, the wholesale fee that typically is made by people that are wholesaling houses, somewhere around $15,000 per transaction. Not bad, right? 15,000 usually. You don't have to put too much work into it. If you do a few of those, you're doing okay, right? In a month, right? However, with commercial real estate, the beauty is that you can easily make 6 figures on each one. We've done it. We've done it multiple times. And I'm talking about, on the low end, right? 100,000, 6 figures. And on the high end, it could be several hundred thousand. In fact, we have 3 transactions right now, 2 of them getting pretty close to closing. And those 2 transactions, the wholesale fee on those is 7 figures. Let me say that again. The wholesale fee is 7 figures. That's what the company brings in, right? And we distribute it among all of our people in the office, right? So that's reason number 1. You get to make way more money if you're wholesaling. If you're a realtor, 3% of 5 million is a lot more than 3% of $500,000, right? Whether you're wholesaling or you're a realtor, the numbers are much nicer, right? So if you're doing a transaction. So that's number 1. Number 2, when you do commercial real estate, the depreciation, right? Because the property is so much bigger, the depreciation is massive. So just to give you guys an example, there's a gentleman, right, that we're working with, one of our clients, and this guy is very successful. He's in his late 30s, and he owns a company where he makes, and he's got partners, but his take home is over $1 million a year. And if you know a little bit about taxes, you realize that, well, the tax, the tax burden, the taxes that he's going to have to pay on that are going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars unless he can protect it somehow. Well, we're helping him with, it's looking at some investments, some apartment buildings, and he has some apartment buildings that he bought before he met us, and we've helped him buy another one, and then there's another one that he's looking at. But my point is that I don't know, I'm not his tax preparer, but I can tell you that with all these apartment buildings that he's got tons of depreciation. Very likely will not pay anything on his, as far as taxes, right? By the end of the year, he will pay 0 taxes on $1 million in income. That's huge, right? With houses, you can do it, but and I'm gonna stop referring to houses. I mean, you see what the juxtaposition is here, right? I'm comparing houses to commercial, so you get what I'm driving at. So you can protect massive amounts of income with commercial real estate because the depreciation, the number you're working with, is so much bigger. So that's number 2. Number three, let me see here. And this one's important, and I won't go into it in too much detail because I've done another video to discuss some of these, this point right here specifically more in detail. But I'll just quickly just explain to you guys what number 3 is. So it's with commercial real estate, the valuation of the property is not based on what your neighbor sold his property for. Yeah, it's affected by what your neighbor did, but it's minimally, right? Really, when it comes down to it, right, most of it is, what is your property generating? What is the NOI? Not the gross, but the NOI, right? The net operating income. And the beauty of commercial real estate is that if you're creative, you can increase that NOI. One of the videos that I've done before, and I'll just briefly touch on it, is so for example with storage units, right? You could buy a storage unit that belongs to to somebody who's operating it. It's a C-class, right? Just drive up, storage, self-storage. You can go ahead and buy that storage facility, and then you can go ahead and add real nice office where you have maybe a UPS store, maybe you have an Amazon drop-off, and I don't know if that makes you any money, but you can have a U-Haul, right? You can get a U-Haul franchise, you can get vending machines, you can have shipping and packaging supplies. So all this stuff adds to your NOI, right? And there's a bunch of other stuff you can do as well, but the point is your storage facility went from having an NOI of, say, I don't know, 200,000 a year to now having an NOI of 300,000 a year, which that 100,000 is wonderful. But what's even better than that is because properties are valued based on NOI, and the typical formula, there's a number of formulas, but the more common metric is a cap rate. So if you take that 100,000 and you apply a cap rate to it, in fact, what you've done is you've increased the valuation of your property, not by 100,000, but by $1 million or $2 million, or depending on what what cap rate you're using, right? You can increase the value of your property in commercial real estate even if everything around you is not looking good, right? Even if the economy isn't good, or even if your neighbor, went in foreclosure and he, sold his property to short sale and it was dirt cheap or whatever, right? It's the NOI at the end of the day is king. And that's what it's all about, because at that level, right, at that level of the game, what an investor is doing is essentially buying a stream of income. And if you're promising him a stream of income of $300,000 a year, right, and then there's an identical looking property next to yours, and they're providing a stream of income that's $200,000 a year, well, there's no question about it. That's worth 50% more, right? No question about it. And that's the beauty of commercial real estate. And you can manipulate that. You can, and I say manipulate that, I mean you can increase that, right? All you got to do is just use some creativity. And there's no limits to how creative you can be to increasing the value of your property. So, and you can do that with retail, you can do that with office space, you can do that with storage units, like I said. So yeah, you can get real creative, even with apartment buildings. If you get real creative, you might even be able to do it with apartment buildings. An example of that is where sometimes they'll have storage units, right, inside of a community of apartment buildings, or they'll have pet fees, right? They'll charge people pet fees so that they can actually have dogs. So they'll charge, right, the tenant an additional $75 or $100 a month to have a dog there. And they're still responsible, right, for making sure that when they leave that the carpet looks great and that, there aren't stains all over the place. But you just increased your income by, implementing that exception and allowing people to have pets. So it's just an example. So that's number 3. Number 4, so when you have a piece of real estate, right, and you sell it, and it's an investment piece of real estate, in commercial real estate, because you're talking about large numbers, you can 1031, right, just like you could with a house. But and I bring it up because I just want to make sure you guys understand, you could do a 1031 with any piece of real estate, but with commercial real estate, because you're talking about large numbers, what it does is it allows you, and by the way, for those of you that don't know what that is it's where let's say you have a property, right? You have $1 million in equity, right? You've had it for a couple years and you've done some creative stuff and you've increased the income. You sell it for $1 million more than what you paid for, and then you sell that property. That $1 million does not go into your bank account or into your pocket, right? It goes into a 1031 exchange company and that's all they do, right? Type of thing. You put the money there with them, and then you have a X number of days to then turn around, identify another property to put that money into, and by doing that, you pay 0 in taxes, which is huge, right? You don't have to pay any taxes on that $1 million you just made on that property. You just get to roll it over or 1031 it into another property. And the beauty of commercial real estate is you get to do that and the numbers are huge, right? So you get to scale real quickly. So instead of going from 1 door to 2 doors, or 1 door to 4 doors, maybe optimistically, you get to go from 10 to 30, from 30 to 50, or 50 to 100, right? Depending on how much equity you got, right? How much money you've been able to make on that property. So the beauty of commercial real estate in that regard, right, in connection with 1031 exchanges, is that you get to scale very quickly. Before you know it, you have 100 doors, right? So the challenge is just in the beginning, right? Being able to get that down payment, because you do have to come up with a bigger down payment. But then once you do, you just keep rolling it over into bigger and bigger properties, and yeah, So that's another cool thing. That's number 4. Number 5. So once you have a property, right? So let's say you buy a storage unit, right? We're gonna use that one. We do a lot of storage units, right? We're developing some storage units in San Pete, and we like storage units. So I'll use that as an example. So if your number 5 is cash out refi, and what it is so if you come in, you buy a storage facility, right? Let's say you bought it for $2 million, right? And then you increase the income by doing any number of things that I mentioned already. And then you can watch my other video and I talk about some other things you could do with storage units to increase the NOI. But you keep doing that, right? To the point where that storage facility, and you increase the rates, right? To match whatever the market is. But once you get that where it needs to be, right? You get that facility operating and all, just running well, then let's just, as for the sake of the example, let's say now that property is now worth not 2 million, right? But it's worth 5 million, right? And banks will typically give you, let's say it changes, right, with whatever's going on in the economy, but let's say they'll give you a 70% LTV, 70% loan to value. So that means that on this property here, that's $5 million, right? They're going to be loaning you approximately, if it was 7 million, it's about 3.5 million, right? That's what they will loan on it. But if you, right, you bought it for 2 million and you came in with, let's say you came in with a down payment of $500,000, right? So 2 million is what you bought it for. $500,000 you came in with cash, right? That's what you put as your down payment when you originally bought it. So you got $500,000 in equity, right? Now it's worth 5 million. If a bank will loan you 3.5, well, the difference between 2 million and 3.5 is 1.5 million, right? Plus the $500,000 you already had in equity. So now you're looking at, you can actually take out, right? Cash out refi, you could take out $2 million out of that property, right? When you refinance it, right? Cash out refi, you take out $2 million, and now you're able to use that 2 million for whatever you want. Either go buy another facility or whatever it is you want, right? Whatever's allowed under the IRS code, but it's tax-free. It's tax-free money, right? If you wanted to go buy, a facility and then you had $500,000 left over, you wanted to go buy a McLaren and put your company logo on it, well, there you go, right? Check with your tax professional to make sure you don't get in trouble for that. But what I'm saying is it's tax-free money and it's huge amounts of money. And the beauty of it, it's not like where, like say for your typical person, right, that has their primary residence and they do a cash out refi, well, now they have to pay an additional $200 a month to pay that off. Well, with this facility here, right, before you do your cash out refi, before you go and get your loan for 3.5 million, you're going to do the numbers and make sure that the facility can pay for that. So your tenants, right, if it's an apartment building, or your clients, if it's a storage facility, they will pay that debt for you. So they're paying the debt down, right? Your cash flow on the property decreased, right? Because now you have a bigger loan. But now you got $2 million to go and do something with, right? Go and be creative. Go make more money. Turn that 2 into 5 again, right? So anyways, that's number 5. So number 6 is, with commercial real estate, you have less competition. The general consensus is, right, that commercial real estate is more complicated. And it is. There's a number of things that make it a little more complicated, but it's all stuff you can learn. But because not everybody's willing to go out there and learn this stuff, right? Whether it's systems or the math or all these different metrics and, KPIs and whatever it is, right? Like the terms, right? The terminology, especially in the beginning. So because most people are not willing to do that, what that does is it gives you less competition. Anybody can go and buy a house, right? Well, almost anybody. But not anybody can go out there and buy a 50-unit apartment building or a 30-unit apartment building. So you will have competition because there are other people that are in that position to buy something like that, but you have fewer people that are able and willing to compete at that level, right? Less competition means more opportunity, right? It's the bottom that's crowded, right? I don't know if you guys ever heard that term. I don't know who it's from. It's a quote, but it's so if you start investing in commercial real estate and you start leveling up, there's less competition. It's not as crowded. Tons of opportunities. So that's number 6. And number 7, and this one's huge. Number 7, potentially one of the best ones. Not the best one, but one of the best ones out of the 7. So you have better leases. So you have significantly better leases. And what am I talking about? So let's start out. With just a few different points here. In commercial real estate, it's very common to have what's called a triple net lease, or a net lease, right? And then sometimes it's written just with 3 N's and it says lease. So if you ever see that, but what it means is that the tenant, right? Your tenant that's renting that place from you, he pays for everything, right? And it's all negotiable, right? But typically they pay for everything. And what that means is they pay for the taxes, right? The property taxes. They pay for the insurance. They pay for their own utilities. They pay for all their own repairs, everything. everything. That would never happen with an apartment building or even with a small house, right? It just wouldn't. You have to, there's a problem with the toilets, you're fixing it. If somebody, punches a hole through the wall, you're fixing it. So that's not the case with commercial real estate. So huge. Also, with an apartment building, right? You lease it to somebody. Typically, they lease it for a year, 2 years. You know what I mean? Typical, maybe 6 months, right? Well, with commercial real estate, usually you're looking at tenants that are going to sign a lease that are at least 2 years. Very often, 3, 5, 10 years. Amazon will, if you build one of their buildings, they'll sign a lease for 30 years. You have longer term tenants. That's huge. Another one is with an apartment building, right? So if somebody rents your apartment building or rents your house, and let's use a house, right? So they rent your house. If they can't pay the rent, typically they're struggling, right? People don't like to move as long as it's a decent house, right? Nice house. Unless it's too small for them. I mean, generally people they'll pay their rent, right? If they're able to, right? If it's too small for them, but financially they're doing well, they'll pay your rent. And then they'll go get something bigger. But my point is this: if they don't pay your rent, right? Here's the point: if they don't pay your rent, you're not going to be able to. You could take them to court and try to sue them, right, for the rent that they didn't pay. But good luck, right? If they didn't pay you for your rent, they're struggling already, right? They're broke, right? Because that's just common sense. However, with a commercial property, a lot of times what you have is business owners, and they have to personally guarantee the lease. So if they sign a 5-year lease, then they have to personally guarantee that 5-year lease. And you say, well, maybe if they lose their business, they're broke. Well, not necessarily, right? A lot of business owners will have multiple businesses, and they have lots of assets. So they will make sure that they come to some sort of an agreement with you, right? Amicable agreement, because the last thing they need is you going after their house or you going after anything else. Now, if they set the whole thing up under an LLC and they did everything properly, right? If they're smart, about the way they went about it, then you really wouldn't be able to do anything except go after some of the assets of the business, if there's any assets, right? So it's an advantage, but it's not a big one under the section of leases, right? Better leases. Another one is, so if you have a house, generally, right, you just put your for rent sign, and you just, either lower your rent or raise your rent to try to get more people or to get better quality applicants. With commercial real estate, you can get creative. There's all sorts of creative things you can do to try to get some tenants, right? Any number of things. There's these things called tenant improvements, right? TIs. And you can offer TIs to a business, right? To get them in there, right? Or you can offer them, and that's generally, like with some buildings, that's just kind of standard. But you can increase the TIs, right? To make them a really nice office, to induce them to come. You can have it to where, the first few months is relatively cheap, right? The first 6 months, and then you just scale, right? You'd let them know, right? Hey, look, this is what I want. I want $10,000 a month, but I understand you're a brand new business. You have a budget. You've indicated to me that you need about 6 months for your business to really take off. I'll give you the first 6 months for $5,000 a month, and after that, each month it goes up by 1,000. So month 7, it'll be 6,000 and 7,000 until it gets to 10,000, right? And then you can even get creative and tell them, and then because I gave you such a huge discount, I want you to then for the next 6 months after you hit a year to also pay me 11,000, right, each month. Or you just increase the terms, right? So now instead of a 2-year lease, I want you to sign a 5-year lease. There's all kinds of creative things you could do. It's kind of cool. You can get real creative with that. Another thing you can do too is that you can include in your contract, in your lease, what's called an assignment of lease document. So what that does is it makes it to where, so if you have a tenant, right, and they're struggling, they can't pay, and they know they can see it coming, right? If you're a business owner, usually, right, if you're on top of your stuff, you could see it coming that you're struggling. And then what you do is you tell them, well, you can assign your lease to somebody else, but you're still responsible, right? So your business, right, is not going to be able to continue operating. Go ahead, market this office space for me, right? Do the work. Find somebody to take over your lease. I got to approve them. But then once I approve them, even though, they might come in, the first tenant, right? You're still responsible, meaning if tenant number 2 doesn't pay, I can still come after tenant number 1 for the remainder of the lease. That's huge. That's huge. That's not something you can do with, in an apartment building or a house, right? And you can try to do it with an apartment building, right, and a house, but it's just not as, it's not something that most people are amenable to. So anyways, so that's number 7. So anyways, number 7's better leases, right? So let's go over them again. Number 1 is the transaction fees, whether it's a wholesale fee, a finder's fee, or a realtor, charging a commission. Number one is that those numbers are significantly bigger, not that much more work, and sometimes actually less work. It depends, right? Number two, it's the massive depreciation that you get, which protects you from taxes. So if you're making, hundreds of thousands a year, huge, right? To have commercial real estate, you get to protect all that income. So number three, the valuation of commercial real estate, it's based on the NOI. It's not based on what your neighbor sold his property for, right? It's based on how creative are you and how much money can you squeeze out of that property. Number four, the 1031 exchanges, right? With commercial real estate, allow you to be able to scale very quickly from 10 doors to 100 doors within a short time. Number five, it's the cash out refis. Cash out refis, if you've been able to increase the value of that property, you can do cash out refi, take out your original investment, and then you have an infinite return, right? Because even if you're, I didn't mention this, but once you do a cash out refi, your entire investment is out of that deal. So that means that whatever you're making, right, whatever you're cash flowing is infinite return, right? You have no money in the game. You have no skin in the game anymore. Now your money has been deployed elsewhere. So that's the cash out refi is huge. Number six, you have less competition because people are just kind of intimidated by commercial real estate. And the deals are bigger, you have less competition, right? There's a barrier to entry. And number seven, the leases are significantly better. Like there's no competition. Anyways, I hope that was helpful. I've enjoyed making this video. And anyways, if you'd like to learn more about commercial real estate, go to 511k.com and look us up. And I hope this was useful, and I hope you're not one of those people that is now afraid, still afraid of commercial real estate and is hesitant. Hope this video helped you get over that hump, right? And you're ready to move forward, take the next step, level up, and play in the big boys game. So in the major leagues, right? So look forward to seeing you guys in my next video, and take care.